This episode is a continuation from the previous episode where we discuss fashion businesses that actively go against the current growth imperative. In episode 6, we spoke with Chu Wong, founder of the now inactive fashion tech startup Shop Bettr. In this episode, I speak to Rachel Tan, founder of Justo Justo, an Instagram thrift store, and she's also formerly No Carrier Please on Instagram. Rachel spoke candidly with me about when and why she stopped being active on No Carrier Please and subsequently decided to cease operations at Justo Justo. I went into this episode hoping to understand the dilemma and dissonance encountered and experienced whilst running a sustainable fashion business. But as we addressed that, we moved on to also speak about the secondhand thrift culture in Singapore and the ethics and moral dilemma of clothing resale via social media platforms. Listening to our recording again, I do wish that I had brought in more nuanced points of view for the conversation to be more critical to the topic of discussion. Rachel also raised doubts about how we can truly transform into a more equitable system when the status quo points to a very different reality. She shares that on most days, this feels like an insurmountable task to tackle, to which I absolutely agree. This also reminds me of episode 5 of the series titled What Can Smallness Look Like, where Esther shared how she seeks comfort within her community groups and spaces to keep her going. If this is also something that you wonder and think about, you would enjoy the episode. So, in an attempt to do justice to the issues in discussion, I've also made further notes on my transcript to elaborate and substantiate some of the points we brought up, because I think I didn't manage to do so during the actual recording. They are typed in orange and indicated in brackets. As usual, a link to the transcript will be included in the show notes below. Okay, hi Rachel. Welcome to Rewear. Can you please tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Okay, I'm Rachel. I'm currently working in a local design company called Beyond the Vines. I'm pretty sure my pronouns are she, her. I'm pretty sure so you can call me because to talk about Justo Justo and all the other things I used to do last time. If I know what I'm wearing, I'm actually wearing these pants from this local company called Home. I think that's how you pronounce it. They just started.
Ooh.
They're actually like made for men, but I really like the that fit because I have no hips, so it works for me.
Oh wow.
And then so I got them, and then this is just like a secondhand, just normal basic racer thing. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's nice to speak to you again after so long. Can you please share a bit about like why you started Justo Justo and why you ended the business and how you sort of wrap things up? Maybe give us like an overview on the timeline or
yeah. Okay, so when I heard this question, I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I had to like think back really like why I started, because I think it's quite blurry, you know, my memory of like why I started, because I ended it for a very, very different reason. So sometimes I kind of tend to look at the memories and go like you know, in a very negative way. But just the other day I was like kind of revisiting like old photos that I used to like post, you know, like as in for Justo Justo. And I was like, actually, I did have a good time. You know, at the early start of it, I did have a very good time. I started it after I did this. I mean, I used to run like an activist account called No Care Please. That was like, as much as like it was really fun for me, I think mentally it drained me a lot. Not because of activism, but I think like I couldn't wrap my head around a lot of things, and a lot of things didn't sit well with me. And I think in that same way, that's also why I ended Justo Justo. So when I started Justo Justo, I also just so happened to end No Therapy stuff because I felt that, okay, like, I think I wanted to move out into something more niche, not just talk about like some like overarching things on No Therapies. So and I really, really liked what Set Cat Shop Fashion Pulpit were doing last time. Set Cat was like, she just did stuff that out of like pure fun, you know. And I think that was what the draw was to me, like, oh, I would like to do something good and lighthearted at the same time. And also because I guess I used to be, back then, like carousel was something that nobody liked to use. Like honestly, like every time I tell my friends, like they're like, oh yeah, friend, I was like, carousel, they're like, ew, like I will never buy anything from carousel, because like, you know, you meet the craziest and wildest people there. So I mean, right now you still meet crazy people, but everyone's just like, yeah, who cares, you know, that's just part of using that whole thing, right? But I remember back then it was such a, like, nobody wanted to use it. So because I carouseled so many things, I was like, oh my gosh, I might as well like sell those things that I find there and act like a third party, you know what I mean? That's okay, that sounds super fun. And then obviously after that I moved out of carousel, because I was like, oh, like it's not scalable. Like thinking, I thought it from a very business profit point of view. I was like, okay. Then I went to, I had this contact with this I used to do a lot of activism work, right? So I guess my network was pretty vast then. And I went in contact with this guy who did paper recycling, and he had this paper recycling plant, and I always wanted to ask to talk to him and stuff. Then one day I was like, hey, have you heard of like textile recycling things? I would like to know more about everything. I was like, oh, let me link you up. And he linked me up. This guy who does textile recycling, and he's basically the king of Karang-Guni men lah. So all the Karang-Guni men who collect clothes bring the clothes to him. He exports them. So that's just how like it worked. And then when I contacted him, I was like, can I? And it really like, it's not like, I won't say shady lah. I'm not trying to like to exoticize it, but it really is damn rabak. You know, you go there, like my hands are completely black. You know, it's like I talked to him. It's like super like, I mean, he's a super nice guy lah, but it's not the most glamorous thing lah. I'm like literally I'm climbing up clothes, like they're like at least 2 stories high, and he's just looking at me, he's laughing, because he's like, what the hell are you doing here at Tuas doing this, you know? So honestly, I just had a lot of fun scavenging for clothes, selling them. But I think with many layers to the whole secondhand thing, as with honestly every capitalistic thing, would be that it ends up being, there's something that just doesn't seem right. Many things don't seem right, whether they're small or they're big, and they build into something that I was like, wait, what am I contributing to? When it was small scale, it's fun, it's cute, right? And even though you're doing the same thing, if it's at the large scale, it just somehow looks detrimental. So I think that's when I pulled away. I was like, even though I'm doing the very same thing from the very start, it just feels different. Yeah. So I think that's when I stopped, because I realized that because it's now accessible, it's made accessible to everyone now, that the middle party that I played was made void, you know? And my middle partyness was now a profit making thing, solely profit making, instead of actually bridging something. So I think that's when I was like, really, there is no need for me. Yeah. And I think that and I think social media is very scary. Like I until now, like there's something that I mean, I guess this will be the first time on this episode, will be the first time where I actually get to talk publicly about how I feel a lot about it. Oh my god, I'm actually feeling some stuff, but like, okay, I will try not to. But I think it was a lot of things that people said to me on there was honestly quite scary. And I think that when you voice your views so publicly, people have an impression of you that they form, which may or may not be correct, you know, like, and not necessarily negative, you know. But for example, if I would talk on my IG stories, they see a very like bubbly or like a very outspoken side of me, and then forming these labels to what I am when I am actually not. And that's something that I would have to accept if I did social media, which I could never. And I spent a long time trying to accept that people form these ideas of me, not just ideas of me, but the way I think, the way I act, and what I believe in. And sometimes I felt that I didn't want anyone to have that space, you know, like, unless you're my good friend. Yeah. So I think that's also why I put things to an end, because after I realized that people box a lot of my views on certain things, and I felt that if I had to defend myself, it was this dilemma of like, do I have to defend myself? And if I defend myself, it'll appear a certain way, leading them to only box me even more. You know? So I was like, yeah. And I think that's when I realized that so many of the views of sustainability was so nuanced, was so contextual, that I don't think I had that capacity to explain it on a platform, you know. And after a while I realized that at the end of the day, like if I started it to do like to bridge and the bridge has already been bridged, then there was no reason for me to be there on a very practical, objective point of view. So I guess that's why like it ended. Yeah. Yeah, I realized that I mean it just wasn't necessary anymore. Then the whole I guess the whole emotional part of it, that was something that it was just naturally I had to work at, you know. And I think honestly I still think like I'm working at it. I don't even have like my personal socials, even even if I have them, it's just for solely my job, like the work that I do now. Yeah.
So would you say that a huge, I guess, obstacle that was in the way is that you didn't want to attach yourself to Justo Justo and the work that you did for Justo Justo? You saw it as just a bridge, right? It's a thing that is separate from you, that's removed from your personal identity. But because of what you were doing previously, which is like with No Career Please, a lot of people sort of attached that expectation of No Career Please to Justo Justo, and it was draining and very, yeah, it was too
Yeah,
much.
I think I mean this pretty spot on like I think even before when I started with those though, I didn't even have like a single picture, and because I shouted it on No Care Please, there were 1,000 followers there, you know. So I think
Wow.
that it made me realize that the people I'm carrying forward are not like new people who are interested in interested in fashion. They're like people who know me before, and as much as I love that, because I mean I can't say that what I put out there was like not me, right? Obviously there was they knew a huge part of who I was, but I think as it grew, that personality definitely gets diluted, gets misunderstood, and it wasn't the intimate space no matter how hard I tried for it to be. But I think back then also like I wasn't so conscious in the moment, you know what I mean? It's not like I can look at it right now in retrospect and go like, well, like I know who I was, you know, like in that moment it was just me grappling for things that felt right, you know. There was no like, okay, let me sit down, let me pause, have a little break for like a month and think about it, like, and then reform my how I want to approach things. Even if I did, it was very clouded, you know, like I didn't know the right way to do it. So even when I started Justo Justo, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk solely about my views on fashion, on sustainability. I put up my views because it was also personal, right? And I did want my work to be impactful and educational in some way, not just purely out of because superficially this looks good, right? I wanted to have an impact. And because the nature of how attractive it was, like, oh my gosh, she's selling pretty clothes, right? It definitely brought new people. So with new people, I was like, okay, opportunities to educate, right? But then obviously educate meant that people, again, when you put out your views out there, people form different impressions of you. Very different from how the way I used to talk in No Care Please. So I guess with so many different layers, I was like, what the hell am I doing? You know, and I think that's when it finally, I think after I think it was 1.5 to 2 years of doing Justo Justo, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm really done. Yeah. And yeah, I think almost like I mean, I guess adding on to like back to the first question, I think after I felt guilt. I felt guilt for making money from it. Um, Even though I don't think there should be any guilt for making money from it. You know, like everyone's gotta eat, you know, and if it was a business venture, I don't think that was wrong, you know. So until now, I still don't think it's wrong if it's a business venture, you know, like because at the end of the day, like as individuals, you'll never be powerful enough. I mean, not that it's nothing, but I'm saying that that tiny work that I do, even if it's like there's a little bit of bad, is better than not doing anything at all, I'd say. So I think, yeah, but I guess I felt like a hypocrite, you know, like if I did a business venture, it felt like I was encouraging something that I didn't believe in, you know. Yeah, but not that I think it was wrong, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I think there were like there's so many reasons why things ended.
What were the sort of significant efforts that you put in to really sort of resist the status quo? What were you really trying to do different?
Okay, I mean, if we talk about like the everyday things, right, and the things that just didn't sit right with me, was obviously like phase one when I first started reselling was an idea that I was so for, you know. I was like, sure. I mean, it's definitely second best. I mean, obviously, if you talk about not consuming is best, swapping is second to that. The third will be reselling clothes, right? And back then, I mean, I think it's very hard to shift our mind backwards, but really like back then, right, when those 3 years ago, like it was okay, you know, like it was very okay to resell clothes because it was an option that no one had, right? And I think like I said just now, like when it got popular, that's when I think I felt that that dissonance, I guess, that okay, like this is not okay because you see, I guess because it's so visible, like you look at your phones and the way it floods, because the way it worked, the system worked was like comment first, right? First come, first serve, right? And it was the only way. I mean, if you think about it, if you put it on a website and then you get them just like whoever cuts it out first gets it, right? It probably isn't as scary as seeing it on comments. You see in that 30 seconds, I can remember like I posted it like in 30 seconds, there were 46 comments. And I was like, what the hell? Like, that's insane, you know?
And to actually see the comments coming in, right? Because you would receive notifications.
Correct. You actually see a very visible, like, the demands, like, boom, and people, the way people want to swallow something, you know, which, I mean, back then it was like, again, I see this in hindsight, right? But back then I was like, whoa, that's so cool, you know, like people really want this item. And then after that, I'll feel the guilt. Wait, like, and then I'll sit in, they're like, why is this a need, you know, like am I encouraging them to consume and even the way, I mean, when I describe a pair of something, you're creating a desire, you know, like when I describe, like I caption the item, like, oh, it's from dated back when, where is it from, the details of it, I am creating a desire, you know, not am I just making sure that they do purchase it well, but I'm creating a desire, right? And I think even down to timing the drops, making sure that everyone gets to camp there at 10 p.m., it's creating a desire. I mean, honestly, alternatively, I can just drop it as and when whoever comes first. Obviously, that dilutes the demand, which I did try, by the way. I did try doing that by, even though that meant decreasing my demand, I did try to space out. I said, okay, drops will happen 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. You can time management, but then also meant that I had to be on my phone all the time. I couldn't just do it one shot. So I was like, okay, like I can't do this. It's just so impractical. Like whenever I launch it, I have to check like every 10 minutes anyone comments so that I will make sure to attend to that person faster. You know, but and this is during school and whatever not, right? So it was I tried, but it was too much work, you know, and I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna like do that 10 p.m. thing and make people camp for it. I don't care. Like I can't sit up for 12 hours and then just wait, you know. So I think like
you can't compromise your own sort of well-being and
correct.
mental health.
But part of me felt that if I truly believed in it, it was a small price to pay. You know what I mean? Like just one day sacrificing that one whole day of just like, okay, dropping it. But then it didn't make sense. After you're like, okay, I'm going to try to do it. Like, so you focus on those, you narrow down to the small details of how to make it better. And then I'll retract and be like, in the grand scheme of things, does that small thing actually have a huge impact? You know, or is it just to appease my guilt? But the impact wise, it's the same thing, you know? So like, I think that was one thing. I guess another thing that would be like the reselling of clothes. I think after a while, when people started talking about how it was bad, I was like, why didn't I not think it was bad last time? And it's not like, okay, I don't mean as in like, oh, I'm very educated, but I mean like it wasn't that I came in as a newbie into sustainability, right? Like I dove so deep into it. So I felt like I could trust that I had that knowledge, that I would think about it if it was consumeristic, you know. And I think back then when I first started this venture, all my friends that I made in that space were super for it. They were like, oh my gosh, this is so good, you know, because you're actually making it available to people who have no idea, who have no clue what it's about, you know. And everyone was like super for it. But then I think it became more popular. All my friends were like, dude, like it's a lot, you know, like and then I think that's when I was like, okay, like how do I in my mind convince myself that reselling now is bad, you know. And I think, okay, bad, I don't mean to call it bad, but you know what I mean, like it isn't as good as before. So I think that was when I did feel that I had to mentally and morally had to battle that, like which one was worth weighing. So yeah, I think that was
when you say the reselling is bad, quote unquote, right? What do you actually mean by that, if I can clarify?
I think that reselling is bad when something was made, but something could be could have been easily available to someone else. You know, like for example, if when Zack Ketchup and maybe I wouldn't associate her with me, let me not do that. Like she did it, she was someone who just did it and I saw nothing wrong with it. When she did it, I was like, oh my god, so cute. Like, because I'm a huge fan of carousel as well. So good that you're putting all that, making it more accessible, right?
On
I mean,
Instagram,
it's just
right? Like opening a
yeah,
new channels to
yeah. And to me it was like, if like that wasn't bad, right? Because she'll just make it more accessible. She's making sure that people could be advantage of it, you know. And then it was, now I say it's bad is because when people started realizing, hey, carousel is useful, bunch of filters, how you can expand your options there, how you can streamline things, how you can actually have super freaking good stuff there, what do you have to search, you know, when you finally master that tool, then it's more accessible to everyone. Then there's like that middleman, which was me, was made redundant, right? So if I force myself in there and profit from it, then it becomes bad, you know. So I mean, I wish we can give a good analogy to this. I'm pretty sure that, but I'm just so afraid I spill one and it ends up being shit. But like I think it was just basically like, when I say bad, it just means that it's now it's almost as if like I'm fighting with them for the goods. You know what I mean? Like, because they already know where it comes from. They know where it comes from. They know how to get it. It doesn't make sense for me to fight with them and sell it to them, you know. So I think that's what I mean by bad. But if you're coming from a business standpoint, like someone who's not for the environment for this, which honestly you do you, right? And I can't say that's wrong, because if you don't buy into it, you don't buy into it, right? If you feel like you're doing this solely for making money, I wouldn't dare say that that's wrong. You know what I mean? I think then yeah, it makes sense for you to camp at Lucky Plaza once it opens, doors open, snatch things as they come, go to carousel, source the fastest things. It makes sense, you know, like, but if you're doing it from a sustainability standpoint, it doesn't make sense. I think like that's where I come from when I mean bad, you know, wrong.
Yeah. I mean, these dilemmas also come from the fact that we live in this system and we're trying to make sense and survive in this system. And I think what you pointed towards earlier is that, you know, the fact that you sort of realized that you didn't need to be this middleman anymore for, say, consumers or wearers of clothing and the bulk or like the sort of more desirable items within, you know, the clothing that were going to be thrown away or sent to landfill or exported out to other countries. So there is also, I think, I know this is not a question that I had included earlier, but I just wanted your opinion on this. And there has been increasing numbers of Instagram thrift shops appearing, right?
Not so thrift shops, yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost funny how it's sort of become so popular. And I think it's like post Justo Justo period. Like I think it was maybe only within this year or a bit of last year. And that was when people started talking about, you know, the gentrification of the thrift culture, or like how people were saying that if you were buying and you were snatching goods from Lucky Plaza, and you were actually, what you're doing in reality is you're leaving out these this like usable and aesthetically pleasing items from people who can only buy from there. For instance, there's this saying, that's this quote that Barber says, that it's about what we need is a culture change, not a hall change, right? So if you're still buying the same way you're buying secondhand, as you would say on Taobao or from H&M or from Shopee, for example, and you're still buying the same way as you are buying secondhand, then that is also quite telling in itself. But also, that is not to relinquish all responsibility from the seller themselves, from the brands. That is not to say that they don't have power in sort of controlling or navigating these narratives and how they want to form and how they want to story tell. But one thing that stood out to me about Justo Justo is the way I could really, I don't know if it's because I had known you already when you were running Justo Justo, But I could tell that you were trying. Like, I really could tell. I really could tell that you were
Pathetic
trying.
efforts, right? Like me telling, okay, please, like if you before you buy, do you really want this? But at the same time, it's like it's so stupid, right? Like it's like really telling someone like this bubble tea is freaking good, but do you really want this bubble tea? Like you really want it, you know? Like and then at the end of the day, if I said to I take the money, right, it is so
Yeah,
stupid. You can imagine like, how ridiculous that sounds. Like honestly, right, if I was selling something that the money wouldn't go to me, it would make sense, you know, like but the money goes to
right.
me. So stupid, you know. Yeah, and that's why after I was like, what the hell am I doing here, you know? But okay, I mean, you spoke a lot about like the after post so there was like people, I mean there was a whole rhetoric that came up, like people saying like, oh, the gentrification of Lucky Plaza, blah, blah. But actually like during the Husto thingy, like
It
there
was
was
already,
there was conversations, but not maybe not posted publicly, but through my DMs. I would discuss with a lot of people like, yeah, I get it, you know. If you think about it, those sellers are still super useful in getting people who don't want to thrift. Like my friend who breaks down heist every time she goes out to Lucky Plaza, she finds those people really useful, you know, because to her it's like, well, they do the work for me and I don't mind paying the buck, you know. But obviously to someone who that wants to dig good stuff at Lucky Plaza, wants to have it affordable, will be like, what the hell? Like that sucks that you're just taking all the good stuff away from me, you know? And and but that's why like I can't I until now, and I spent so long thinking about this, right? Like post so doing who's those, I thinking about like a perfect solution on this, and I just admitted that there is none.
I think yeah, it's that, and also just knowing that we don't need to be the only solution to this sort of shift that we need to see in the culture. It's not on us, it's on everybody, it's on all of us. And it really is, I think, planting the seeds, or, through very tiny interactions, or, trying to do the best that we can. Like, it really is, that I think it really comes down to that. So, which is why I think the reason why the reason why I created, or I started writing this episode, is really to sort of also speak about sustainable fashion businesses that have closed down. So it's really not to just, because I think a lot of conversations, whether it's on mainstream media or, on in this space, is that we are very much hyper focused on brands that exist, or brands that have made it, or brands that have succeeded in doing this and that, or like, and props to them, because that is rightfully very something that people should be very proud of.
Yes.
But I think what we fail to see or fail to recognize when we celebrate these brands is that maybe, and this is a thought that I have a lot of the times, and it's maybe that, the most sustainable, quote unquote, thing to do when running a fashion business is that when it is when is the good time to wrap things up, or to wrap up the business. Because it's like, okay, like for you recognize that, you have reached your limit. You no longer see a point in Husto being a brand, or an entity. And you knew like it was time to end things. And I think this sort of relationship you have with a thing that you created is very valuable in itself. A lot of people would approach me and ask me about my thoughts on the gentrification of the thrift culture. I do not think that we should be demonizing, or that we should be
Yes, yes,
blaming,
yes.
we should be putting it all on these
The
businesses
seller.
and these sellers. It's sometimes not even businesses, they're just people doing it. It's just a side thing, right? And it really isn't that, because like you said earlier, it really is being that middleman, or just having a sort of additional creative venture that you wanna invest in. And it just so happens that you do it with clothing, which is contentious in itself, because clothes is literally at the intersection of consumption and self-expression, and a lot of other things that comes with accessibility, that comes with accessibility in terms of the color of your skin, the size of your body, and it's all of that. And also what I realized that a lot of these sellers and these businesses are they're pretty representative of them is that they're all really young. It's like all
Yeah.
young people doing it. And I think it's very
And how do
it's
you
not
expect them to go through that thought process?
exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, oh my God, this is going to be so fun. Let's do it. You know what I mean? That
Yes.
there should be the expectation that I want you to think of all these layers before you start
Yeah.
something.
And
Yeah.
we shouldn't have to expect these young people to have to know all of these things, because on top of doing this, they're also trying to figure out who they are, right? I mean, even we are trying to figure out who we are. Like, what about, like, you know, even younger people who are trying to, and it's okay if they do not think about sustainability or whatever, because I think it also goes back to the narrative, right? That is that there's already too much clothing in this world anyway. So it's again, it's a struggle between that and like, oh, but then you're making it less accessible to other people, which is also true in itself. It's, you know, two truths can exist in one space. So I think I would very much, I know no one is asking me this, but I would very much rather we
I'm asking you.
we sort of put this, it's not an anger, but yes, I think we need to be questioning the system. I think that's where I'm coming from. We need to be questioning the system that created the bulk of where secondhand clothing comes from. So the secondhand clothing industry is in itself not a charity, right? It is a trade. It is a business. And as you said, people, there are tradesmen within the secondhand industry that make money out of it.
Yeah.
And
good money, by the way.
And good money. Yeah, I believe that. And that is not to say that it is a better way to make money or a more ethical way to make money, because to them, secondhand or not, clothing is a commodity. So it really is, I think, I would love to hear more conversations that question, that really seek to sort of dismantle and question the current system that we live in, and the fashion system in itself, which is that why we have so much clothing in the first place, right? And why is it that we need to sort of, why does clothing, like, and how I think the way we market our pieces and the way media has a role to play in how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves represented and what sort of clothes we want to wear, like how actually these structures and power have way more responsibility and way more control and power in sort of shifting this culture, right? You know, if we want to speak about culture shift, to a more healthy and a more responsible sort of way of doing things. So yeah, I just, this is a tangent. I've completely derailed ourselves from our main point, but I just wanted to, I think, explain a bit about what I think about, you know, this reselling sort of thing that.
No, I think like absolutely. Like, first of all, like, thanks for like putting that into words. Like what you said, I feel like there is a need to focus on like the bigger parties, the bigger players here. We're talking about like what's the word for it? The like, for example, like fast fashion people, like honestly not fast fashion, like luxury,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that middle between luxury and fast fashion.
Yeah.
Those also basically the bigger guys, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it always, I mean, after, like, just commenting on what you said, like my question I always ask is, what are we asking for? You know, like, because like you said, fashion just happens to be like a medium for creativity, right? It's an outlet where we get to express in a way that it's very visible, it's very tangible, and that is the first thing that gets someone like attracted to you, right? So I just think like whenever I question the system, and you're right, like it's important to want to be critical of the system, both systems, whether it's fast fashion, luxury, or even secondhand. I'm always wondering, like, and there's always like a question I've asked for, like, to my activist friends for the longest time also, is what are we expecting, you know? Because if I'm expecting, let's just say, H&M to not just have like 1% of their business to be recycled materials, but 100%, is that good enough, you know? But then I'm like, no, I'm actually asking you to not push for you to have a weekly drop. You know, I'm asking for you to just slow down your business. But then at what cost, right? That means like really that means your profit, your revenue has to fall. And obviously revenue has to fall, you're talking about payrolls that are going to have to fall, you know. So, and as much as we don't want to look at it like it's a whole structural change, but okay, that means the people who belong there, you gotta like learn how to, what's the word for it, like it's structurally, basically it's not like a, all right, now we're going to cut down from 1,000 factory workers to like 500. It's not, it's like whole structural change, you know, like even in terms of the way we distribute the revenue, right? That means the people,
our economic system basically has to
right.
has to be
So
redesigned.
the change that we're asking for is so huge. It feels so insurmountable sometimes that you kind of look at your resellers and go, okay, like you're doing a good job, lah. You know what I mean? Like I need you here. You know, like it's just like we're asking for a lot. And I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying we should stop asking for it. I think that we really should be pushing for it. And I do think that the activism scene is going somewhere with these like schools of thought, right? But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's just so much to ask for that it sometimes feels insurmountable. Like, so I mean, I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues right now, and we're saying like, if we're asking the brand to be more sustainable, right? What does that mean? You know, that means also rethinking design, you know, like rethinking but let's just say you talk about, if we have like a weekly launch about new clothes, right? Let's, for example, you have a whole collection, 10, 15 SKUs, and then next week you have another 10, 15 SKUs. And what does it mean to rethink design? Let's just not talk about material, let's talk about like design, right? Like that means, okay, like Pangaea, you know, Pangaea has the same sweatshirt thing, right? And weekly or bi-weekly, they have a new drop. Same design, selling essentials made out of, I guess you can call clean materials. Does that make them better? You know, it's better than people who are not producing, like, you know, producing things that are trendy, right? But if you're dropping the same sweatshirt look, and yes, it's not trendy and it's just really, it's timeless in that sense, is that better? You know, like, I guess you could say it's better than nothing, you know. I don't know, like, so I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm just saying that like there's so many solutions that are second best but not best, you know. And best that fills every pocket, you know. And then you come down to think about like the way people, we talk about, honestly, even going down to values wise, right? Like greed, you know, when big CEOs take up like how many percent, majority percent of the profits, right? And leaving but how many percent to factory workers who do manual labor, devaluing that kind of skills. Like then we're talking about a very valued way of doing things, right? And if you're saying like, you know, distribute your funds, you know, distribute your profit, make sure that everything is equal. How do you do that? You know, like it requires good leadership right now to be able to distribute profit equally, you know. And who are we to say that actually like what if on, like, I feel like if someone who's not in the finance or like accounts or like or the business side of things, I would probably look at that person and be like, how do you have so much more skills than me to deserve a pay 3 times more than mine? You know, especially you're saying that I work the same hours as you, but your skills are more valued because you have bigger brains than me. Like, but then that person will probably be like, I can do your job, you know, and your, let's just say I'm doing operations, right? They're like, okay, your operations job is like, it's not as skilled as mine, right? And basically where I'm going with this is that this is so complicated, you know, like this whole thing is so much more than like distribute your revenue. How do you measure that? What are the measurables? How do we distribute that based on working hours, based on, you know, like I guess that's where I always find myself stuck, and then giving up. And then going like, I don't know.
I mean, to your question, I think it really boils down to a restructuring, because you see like, earlier what you mentioned, right? Like say someone who is in the finance sector is viewed, their skill set is viewed as more valued, right? It's more skillful, it's more skilled than someone who, say, does operations or does design or and I think that really comes down to how society values labor, because there are sort of different value or price tags that we attach to each of these jobs. And I think and why is it that a person who is doing, say, business expansion, earning a lot more money than, say, someone who, you know, takes care of the internal team, for instance? I mean, this is, I'm just making a blanket statement, but it is because the former brings in the revenue, right? It brings in the business development, brings in the funds, and that is what society values. It's growth. It's the growth imperative. What quality of your job can help me grow my business infinitely, right? And on a large scale in the quickest amount of time. And this is obviously, I hate to say it, but late stage capitalism, right? Where it's just the whole system that we live in right now is unsustainable in itself. And I think what we're trying to do, like you said earlier, is that we try to seek solutions that provide sustainability through these very unsustainable structures that you know we live in. And to sort of say, like you mentioned earlier, like you would have to almost redistribute your wealth in a sense that, you know, you say even people who are viewed as with, you know, the least skilled workers, for instance, like say in the fashion industry, that would be probably garment workers in the factory, even though that also takes skills and time and blood and sweat and tears. And you know, and it is, I think, redefining what and why they should be receiving as much money as somebody else who's working in HQ, for instance, right? It really is, I think, a redefinition almost of having to really put your money where your mouth is at, right? Which is to ensure equity, is to reparate like these sort of people, the marginalized communities. As we now know, people who are at the very top of things, they don't care. Like, you know, we've seen, you know, from the latest
it's like, can you blame them? You know, like I think that's what I mean, after leaving the whole thing, right? After leaving everything, I'm not saying leaving as in I don't care about it anymore. I'm saying leaving as in voicing out my
removing
opinions
yourself.
Like I spent a lot of time like thinking about, can I blame these people if at the end of the day, the people who belong in these large systems, large companies, are actually just people, individuals who have also their own set of morals formed by their experiences, their brokenness, their whatever, right? Like, can I blame them for wanting to hoard almost these things, like wanting to take full ownership and dominant ownership over something, and then say that it's greed, you know, like that's a power thing, blah blah blah. Like, can I say that that's, I mean, obviously objectively it's wrong, you know, like conventionally it's wrong, right? But if someone has worked so hard, like I'm not, and I know the next question will probably like the government workers also work really hard, but I'm saying that because naturally humans, we don't think about like you're working so hard, you naturally think about yourself, you know what I mean? You think about like, I'm working super hard, like and I deserve this, right? Likewise for the CEO, you know, that CEO is thinking, I work so hard for this, I built this is mine, I take on paper ownership over this, therefore I deserve this, you know, like and this deserves to be majority mine. Can we blame that person? Because it requires a lot to expect empathy, you know what I mean? Expect and I don't mean to kind of put like certain subjective values on these things, but after a lot of thinking, I do feel that it comes down to these things. I do feel that it comes down to very subjective values of, do you have the empathy to look at your government worker and go, the skill you have is something that I'll never be able to pour time and effort into, and therefore I will give you the same amount as I pay my finance person or my product strategist, you know, like And I think that's what I've been thinking about lately, like going down to the individual of every person in that big company. Like, can I blame them for feeling like they expect a certain amount, you know? But I mean, of course, again, not to say that like what you said before, like how there is still a need to redistribute that wealth, you know, and that's still important, blah blah, and for sure. But I guess I always think about the flip side, like is that unfair, you know? Like, is that to almost look, I mean, and you know what, like I honestly, I look at the business that they do sometimes, and I do see it with like a very venal lens, you know. I really look at it and go like, that's corrupt, you know, like it is, you know, to me. But again, can I blame them? And yeah, I think to reduce that scale, I always think about the things that I take ownership of, you know, whether it's a space that I have, or items that I have. I do take a lot of ownership over it, and I do feel that I am deserving of something of it. I would deserve that full ownership, and I got it well, you know. If someone were to expect me to redistribute what I feel that I earned, it is hard to give out, you know. It is hard. So, and they can't blame me, even if it wasn't mine to begin with. Like, the fact that I take ownership over it now makes me feel that I have to protect it, you know. And it's a very human thing to do. Yeah. So I guess, okay, I know I might say very controversial things, and I know all people have a lot like to say about it. And absolutely, I'm not trying to say like what I'm saying is right, you know, but I guess that's what my mind has been thinking about the past few years, you know, as I step out of this whole thing. Like, yeah, whether it's honestly out of like, I'm just because I resigned to the way the world is, will always be like that, like because of human greed, because of selfishness of whatever. Like, yeah, I realized it. Yeah.
I mean, to your point, I think it is important to have and place different expectations on different people based on the scale of their production, of their business, of their organization. So, I mean, if you're not a billionaire, I'm thinking maybe you can have ownership over what you've built and what you've grown. And if you're someone who fully compensates your workers, you know, throughout your entire supply chain, no matter what you are producing, you know, even outside of fashion. And if you can say that if you can touch your heart and with, you know, with a bright conscience say that yes, you are compensating them for the work that they're doing fairly and appropriately, then sure, of course you can own it. Of course you can be proud of it. But for me, I have to disagree and say that I don't think that applies to a billionaire, for instance, that has maybe built, like, you know, this phrase, right, that goes like, if you earn a billion, you must be taking a billion or something like that. I can't remember the actual phrase, the actual quote, but I think it really speaks volumes of how you cannot make this amount of money, this huge amount of money that is unimaginable to people like us and to everyone else actually who do not make these huge amounts of money, to say that, oh, but I built this, because yes, you might have, but it is contingent on so many other aspects of growth that is so intrinsically tied to exploitation, to not being compensated right, to, you know, sometimes even lost lives. Like, I think there is a sort of what do you call it, like a line that we have to draw.
It's a threshold.
Yeah, there's a threshold, I think, to sort of, because what you are doing, and it's completely human of what you're doing, is that you are trying to empathize with these individuals, right? And that is you being a really nice human being and extending this kindness to them. And yeah, I just think that there is a line to be drawn. And I almost feel like, you know, and it's a new thing that people have been talking about within the space, which is that, oh, should we be humanizing brands, for instance? Should we be humanizing billionaires and CEOs, like when they themselves do not actually portray humanistic traits, for instance, like, so yeah, I think and also I think going back to what we were speaking about, which is, these whole the whole idea of a systems change and structural change, I think it's also very dependent on, say, other people who are within the conversation that I think usually are not as visible as, say, fashion brands or fashion CEOs, for instance, like, say, the government. I think the government has a lot of responsibility in trying to put these systems in place and to ensure that, reparations are being enforced, like they are being exercised, and that, it's that they do the due diligence in that way. So yeah. Oh my god, this conversation is like completely.
I know, right? I'm so sorry. I just sidetracked. Please,
No,
I'm not
it's
sure
okay.
if you edit it. Please feel free to cut it, whatever.
Can you speak about what Justo Justo used to mean to you and what it was, and as compared to, like, right now when it's not in operation anymore? What does it symbolize?
Justo was a community, I think, at the start. It was a warm, fun, exciting community. It was a creative outlet, as cheesy as that is. It was a creative outlet. It was I say community because, like, there were so many pop-ups that I attended at the start. There was No Two Alike. That was my very first pop-up.
Sorry, what is it called?
Called No Two Alike. They did this, basically this bunch of people that honestly I had no clue about. Like, they just put a bunch of like vintage collectors in there, and I felt like stuck out like a sore thumb, but like it was still fun, like getting to that space, like that community that it was having. Then suddenly I went into this other thing where we did like secondhand shops. Like, it was very fashion based rather than collectors and then things like that. Like, that was fun too. I think that a lot of it was very community, which I really liked. That was the part we go in there like, hey, hi guys, like, it was fun, it was vibrant. Yeah, like, I think that was what Justo was to me. Honestly, that's also what it was like in No Care Please. Like, No Care Please, I don't know, I still look back at it, I still think that what shines for me is the community. Yeah, I think that's what Justo was to me. Has become a business. I mean, that wraps up how I feel about it, right? It has become a business. I think after a while, when you lose community, it becomes a business. Yeah. It runs on filling someone's desires, milking it, and then profiting from it. And I think that's what it became. But yeah, that's what it was to me. So I think, yeah, to keep it short, that's what I guess. Also, was community became a business.
In both conversations, Rachel and Chu pointed towards their business existing as a bridge. Though different in nature, with Justo Justo being a bridge between secondhand clothes and style-savvy clothes wearers, and then Shop Bettr existing as a sustainable fashion search engine of sorts, introducing sustainable fashion businesses to concerned clothes wearers wanting to support these businesses in return. This similarity, I think, only surfaced after I've spoken to the both of them. But perhaps I had already realized this and therefore wanted to understand why they started their businesses wanting to serve as a bridge in the first place. In our conversation, Rachel brought up that it is human nature to want to leave the best and most for ourselves. And therefore, it is almost unrealistic to demand for corporations and the owners of these corporations to do better for the planet and its people. Upon revisiting our recording, this point sat heavily on my chest. Because are we truly built to be this way? In hopes of searching for clarity and perhaps a rational explanation, I read Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the World by economic anthropologist Jason Hickel, whom I've also mentioned and referenced in the previous episode of True. So, to the argument that vicious competition and self interested behavior are hardwired into human nature, Hiko questions if it is truly human nature or is it just our adaptation to the rules of the game to ensure survival. I didn't want to bring in this analogy because it's been so overused by now, but I think, but think about the premise of Squid Game. When we tear each other apart in the name of quote unquote survival, who are the people that sit back and watch on comfortably? Hickel mentions in the book that it is not human nature that's the problem here. We prioritize personal gain over collective gain because we have a system that allows a few people to sabotage our collective future for their own private gain. If given a chance, would we not want to choose to live in a world and in a system that is the complete opposite of this current state of insecurity? Going back to whether or not sustainable fashion businesses can exist within the current ecosystem, I think it definitely can. There are brilliant examples out there that prove that, one can be small and still survive by building its own support network and community. I hope we take away the whys and hows, not so much the do's and the don'ts as we navigate this conundrum, because who the heck knows given the current circumstance. Now, 7 episodes in the series, one thing is very clear. Our love and appreciation for fashion shouldn't be restricted by the growth imperative. In my opinion, fashion in all its forms should be community serving on a scale that is manageable and not stretching beyond its own means. We don't have to and we shouldn't feel the need to build fashion empires.